Cole Brennan pulled his gelding to a halt on the north ridge. Late afternoon sun cutting gold across empty prairie. Something moved near the creek bend, a quarter-mile distant. He squinted against the light, hand rising to shade his eyes. A woman. Young, maybe mid-20s, working at something near the water. He nudged the horse forward 3 steps, then stopped. The woman hammered at boards, her movements fierce despite her slight frame. Even from this distance, Cole could see the inadequacy of what she was building, a shelter, if it could be called that, cobbled together from scavenged wood. The boards were warped, split, barely holding together. Cole shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. He'd ridden this fence line every day for 3 years. Since Emma died, the land knew his routine. The cattle knew his silence. Now this woman appeared, building hope from scraps. She positioned another board, raised the hammer. The crack echoed across the prairie as the wood split under the blow. She stumbled back, nearly fell, caught herself. Her hands went to her face for just a moment before she reached for another board. Cole's jaw tightened. He recognized that kind of determination. It was the kind that got people killed on the frontier when winter came early. He cataloged details with a rancher's eye. She'd placed the shelter near water. Smart. Stones arranged for a fire pit. Practical. Prairie grass gathered for bedding. Resourceful. But the walls, those pathetic walls of broken lumber, wouldn't hold against the first real wind. The temperature was dropping. He could feel it in the air, smell it on the breeze. Northwest horizon held clouds, gray and heavy. 2 days, maybe 3 before the storm front arrived. A man minded his own business out here. That was the rule. Especially when the business involved a lone woman and social conventions that could ruin a man's standing. Faster than drought could kill cattle. But some rules broke against the weight of conscience. Wind gusted suddenly, testing her structure. The boards shuddered, held by nothing more than bent nails and desperate hope. Cole watched the woman steady one wall with her shoulder while hammering another. Her dress was threadbare, inappropriate for approaching winter. Her boots worn through at the heels. She was going to die out here. The thought came clear and certain, like the first crack of ice on a frozen pond. Not today, not tomorrow. But when that storm arrived and she had nowhere to go, the broken boards would fail. The cold would take her. Emma's voice rose in his memory. Soft and insistent, Cole Brennan. You've got a good heart under all that leather. Don't let the world make you forget it. 3 years since he'd heard that voice. 3 years of going through motions, running a ranch that functioned but didn't thrive. The cowhands did their work. The cattle grazed and bred and sold. Life continued in the shape it had always held, but the center was hollow. He watched the woman work until dusk turned the prairie blue. She finally stopped, exhausted, and huddled near a small fire. The shelter's gaps were visible even from the ridge, spaces where wind would pour through like water through a sieve. Cole turned his horse toward home. The image followed him across the darkening land, a woman building a life with broken boards. The same way he'd been doing for 3 years. Only she didn't have 3 years. She had days. Cole returned at dawn, compelled by something stronger than curiosity. The woman was already working, her movement stiff from sleeping on cold ground. He stayed on the ridge, watching. She'd made coffee over her fire, the smell carrying on morning air. Her hands shook as she lifted the tin cup. When she set it down and picked up the hammer again, he saw the bandages strips torn from her petticoat, wrapped around raw palms. The sun climbed slowly, warming nothing. She worked steadily, trying to shore up the weakest wall. Each board she added seemed to make the structure less stable rather than more. The geometry was wrong, the materials inadequate. She was building failure, one nail at a time. But she didn't stop. Cole felt something shift in his chest, like a door long closed beginning to open. This woman wasn't asking for help, wasn't begging or weeping or playing helpless. She was simply doing what needed doing with what she had. Emma had been like that. First year of their marriage. Drought hit hard, water nearly gone, cattle dying. Emma never complained, never suggested leaving. She just rationed what they had and trusted they'd find a way through. They had. Together. Wind picked up suddenly, stronger than yesterday. The woman looked up, fear flashing across her face. She braced against the shelter's corner post as the gust hit. The weakest wall collapsed. Boards clattered down, nails pulling free from wood too rotted to hold them. The woman staggered, caught off balance, and sat hard in the dirt. She stayed there, motionless, staring at her hands. Cole's breath caught. He waited for tears, for the breakdown that seemed inevitable. It didn't come. She just looked at her palms, bleeding through the makeshift bandages, with the quiet bewilderment of someone who'd given everything and found it wasn't enough. Her face held no self-pity, just exhaustion and a kind of numb surprise. That was what broke through Cole's hesitation, not crying, but silence. Not surrender, but the simple, terrible recognition that courage alone couldn't make broken boards whole. He cataloged what she'd done right: fire pit position to avoid wind, shelter sited near water but above floodline, grass bedding kept dry under salvaged canvas. She wasn't foolish. She was desperate and under-resourced, which was different entirely. Storm clouds were building northwest, darker than yesterday. The temperature had dropped another degree since dawn. His breath showed white in the morning air. She had tonight. Maybe one more. Then the storm would come. And broken boards wouldn't save her. Cole nudged his horse forward, then stopped. Riding down there now solved nothing. He had no lumber, no tools, no plan. Just good intentions, which the frontier buried in shallow graves alongside good people. He turned toward home, but the decision was already made. Some things a man couldn't watch from a distance and live with himself after. Some things demanded action, regardless of convention or consequence. The woman was gathering the fallen boards, trying again. Her determination was going to kill her, unless someone intervened with something stronger than determination, unless someone brought good lumber to replace the broken boards. Cole touched his heels to the horse's flanks and rode hard for the ranch. The sun climbed higher, but the cold deepened. Winter was coming early this year. He hoped to God he wasn't too late. The barn smelled of hay and leather and the accumulated dust of seasons. Cole stood in the half-light, looking at the stack of pine boards he'd purchased 4 years ago, back when Emma was alive and such things mattered. They'd planned to rebuild the porch, make it wider for summer evenings. She'd wanted rockers there, a place to watch sunset together. Then the fever came, and plans changed into memories. He ran his hand along the top board. Smooth, straight, solid, good lumber, waiting all this time for purpose. That's good wood you're hauling off. Cole turned. Dutch stood in the barn doorway, 60 years old and still steady as the posts that held up the ranch. His foreman, his friend, the man who'd kept the operation running when grief made Cole useless. Good wood deserves good purpose, Cole said. Dutch nodded slowly, a smile creasing his weathered face. About damn time you remembered that. Cole loaded the pack horse methodically. Boards, nails, a proper hammer, his good saw. He added a canteen of water, strips of clean cloth for bandages, a tin of salve Emma had made for rope burns. Each item chosen with care, each one a commitment. The other hands watched from the bunkhouse. Young Billy tipped his hat. Old Garcia smiled and returned to his coffee. They understood what was happening, even if Cole couldn't quite name it himself. He was choosing to care about something beyond routine, to build something instead of just maintaining what remained. The stars were emerging as he finished loading. The temperature dropped further. His breath ghosted white in the gathering dark. The northwest clouds had crept closer, heavy with the weight of coming snow. "You need company?" Dutch asked. "No," Cole said, "but I appreciate the offer." "She got a name, don't know yet," Dutch chuckled, "but you know she needs help." "That's enough. I reckon." Cole swung into the saddle, the pack horse's lead rope secure in his hand. The lumber shifted slightly, settling into place. Solid weight. Good balance. The kind of load that had purpose. Boss, Dutch said, stopping him. Emma would have done the same. You know that, right? Cole's throat tightened. He nodded once, unable to speak. Then do it in a way that'd make her proud. Cole rode out under the stars, the Milky Way spilling across the black vault of sky. The moon was 3 days past full, bright enough to see the trail. He let the horse set the pace, steady and sure. The ranch fell behind. The prairie opened before him, vast and silent except for the rhythm of hooves and the creak of leather. The lumber rode solid on the pack horse, purpose given shape and weight. He thought about Emma, about the way she'd challenged him to be better than comfortable. Comfort's for old men waiting to die, she'd said once. We're here to live. Cole. To build something that matters. What mattered now was a woman trying to survive with broken boards. What mattered was crossing the distance between watching and helping. What mattered was using good lumber for good reason. Dawn was breaking as he approached the creek bend, the morning star still bright above the eastern horizon. Frost covered the grass, turning the prairie silver. The woman's shelter was visible now, pathetic in the growing light. He could see her huddled near the fire, wrapped in a thin blanket. She hadn't heard him yet, the creek's murmur covering the sound of his approach. Cole took a breath, steadying himself. What he was about to do would change both their lives. The town would talk. The banker would frown. Social convention would be trampled. But that woman would live through winter. The choice was simple. When viewed that way, he rode down from the ridge as the sun broke free of the horizon. Good lumber and good intentions both. Heading toward a woman who'd shown him what real courage looked like. Sarah Hartwell woke to hoofbeats, fear spiking through exhaustion. She scrambled upright, clutching the blanket, eyes searching for escape routes. A man sat horseback 20 yards distant, silhouetted against the rising sun. Big, weathered, with a pack horse behind him. He made no move toward her, just waited. "Ma'am," he said finally, voice carrying calm across the cold morning. "Didn't mean to startle you." Sarah's heart hammered. She stayed silent, assessing. The man wore working clothes, not fancy. His hands rested easy on the saddle horn, not reaching for anything. The pack horse carried lumber. She could see the boards clearly now. "Name's Cole Brennan," he continued. "Ranch is 3 miles west. I've been watching you try to build with those broken boards." He paused. "Can't build much with broken boards. Mind if I help?" Sarah found her voice. "Why, because that storm's coming." Cole said simply, "And you won't survive it with what you've got." He dismounted slowly, keeping distance, and began unpacking lumber. Good boards, straight and solid. Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to refuse on principle. But principle didn't keep you warm when the wind cut through gaps in rotten wood. "I don't have money to pay you," she said. "Didn't ask for money." Cole laid out boards near her collapsed wall, then looked at her directly. "You've got 2 choices. Ma'am, let me help fix this shelter proper, or freeze to death in 3 days. Your pride's your business. But I'd hate to ride out here and find you dead because you were too stubborn to accept good lumber." Sarah's hands throbbed beneath the bandages. Her back ached from sleeping on cold ground. Her stomach was empty except for weak coffee. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. "All right," she said quietly. "Thank you." Cole nodded once, then started working. He pulled down what remained of her structure without comment, sorted the usable boards from the worthless. His movements were efficient, purposeful. He knew what he was doing. Sarah watched for a moment, then joined him. "Tell me what to do." He glanced at her, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "You know how to handle a hammer." "I learned quick?" Cole almost smiled. "All right then. We'll start with the foundation." They worked through the morning, Cole teaching proper joinery and Sarah absorbing every word. He showed her how to check if a post was plumb, how to brace corners so they'd hold against wind. She followed his instructions precisely, her hands moving with more confidence than they had in days. The silence between them felt comfortable rather than awkward. Occasionally Cole would say, "Hand me that brace," or "Hold this steady while I nail." Sarah responded quickly, anticipating what he needed. By midday, walls stood square and true. Sarah touched one corner post, feeling its solid placement. "It's really going to hold." "Good lumber, good placement," Cole said. "That'll outlast both of us." They shared lunch on the partially completed porch bread and jerky Cole had brought. Sarah ate slowly, trying not to show her hunger. Cole pretended not to notice, which she appreciated. "You got a name?" he asked to Sarah Hartwell. "Where are you heading?" "Miss Hartwell." The question opened the story she'd tried not to think about. "Was heading to Copper Creek. Man there said he'd marry me. Give me a home. Sent letters for 6 months. She looked at her bandaged hands. "When I arrived, he'd married someone else 3 weeks prior. Money ran out 2 towns back. Walked this far before I couldn't walk anymore." Cole was quiet for a moment. "That's rough luck." "That's life," Sarah said, voice harder than she intended. "I should have known better than to trust promises." "Some men keep their word," Cole said. "Others don't. You can't know which until circumstances test them." "And which are you? The kind who shows up with lumber?" Cole said simply. Sarah felt something ease in her chest, just slightly. This man could have ignored her, could have done a dozen cruel things. Instead, he'd brought good wood and patient instruction. "Storm's coming tomorrow," Cole said, standing. "Let's get the roof tight." They worked through the afternoon, the rhythm between them strengthening. Sarah's hands ached, but she didn't complain. Cole's back bothered him, she could tell by how he straightened carefully after bending, but he didn't mention it. On by dusk, the shelter was complete. 4 solid walls, a proper roof, a door that closed firmly. Sarah stood inside, overwhelmed by the simple fact of protection. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Cole gathered his tools. "It'll keep you dry and warm. That's all that matters." He moved toward his horse, and Sarah felt panic rise. "Mr. Brennan." "Just Cole." "Cole." She struggled for words. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "It's plenty," he said, but he looked troubled. He glanced at the northwest horizon where storm clouds massed. "Miss Hartwell, I'm going to speak plain. This shelter solves today. It doesn't solve tomorrow or next month. Winter's coming hard and you've got no supplies, no income, no way to survive it." Sarah's jaw tightened. She knew it was true. "My ranch needs help," Cole continued, speaking carefully. "Cooking, mending, garden work come spring. Pays fair. Bunkhouse has a spare room with a proper stove." He met her eyes. "No obligation. Just honest work if you want it." Sarah's throat closed. Honest work. Fair pay. A room with a stove. It sounded like salvation. "I accept," she said. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Cole nodded once, something like relief crossing his face. "Get some rest tonight," he said. "I'll come by tomorrow morning. Bring you to the ranch." He rode away as darkness fell, and Sarah stood in her solid shelter, feeling the walls that would protect her through the night. She touched the good lumber, the straight boards, the careful joinery. Someone had cared enough to help. Someone had brought good wood when she only had broken boards. She lay down on her grass bedding, warm for the first time in weeks, and let herself hope that tomorrow might be better than today. Cole returned at dawn as promised, riding easy in the saddle. Sarah had packed her few belongings: 2 dresses, a worn shawl, a tin cup, the blanket. Everything she owned fit in a canvas sack. The ride to the ranch took an hour. Sarah rode the pack horse, Cole leading. They traveled in silence, watching the storm clouds mass like dark mountains on the horizon. The ranch appeared gradually barn first, then bunkhouse, then the main house. It was larger than Sarah expected, well maintained but somehow empty feeling. like a place that functioned without living. Cole showed her the bunkhouse spare room, small but clean, with a narrow bed, a stove, a window facing east. "It's not fancy," he said. "It's perfect," Sarah replied, setting down her sack. The next days fell into rhythm. Sarah rose before dawn, cooked for the hands Cole, Dutch, Garcia, young Billy. They were polite but distant, waiting to see if she'd last. She learned the kitchen, found where things were kept, noted what supplies were low. On the third day, she started organizing. The pantry was chaos, supplies jumbled without system. She spent the afternoon sorting, labeling, taking inventory. When Cole came in for supper, he stopped short, staring at the transformed space. "I hope this is all right," Sarah said quickly. "I just thought—" "It's good," Cole interrupted. "Real good. Emma tried to organize that pantry for years. Never had time." Sarah heard the catch in his voice when he said the name. Emma, his wife, clearly. The one who died and left this place half alive? She didn't pry. Everyone had losses. They ate supper together that evening, Cole, Sarah, and the hands. Dutch told stories about early days on the ranch. Garcia showed Sarah the good fishing spots on the creek. Billy asked if she could teach him to read better, his face reddening with embarrassment. "I'd be honored," Sarah said, and meant it. After the hands left, Cole and Sarah sat at the kitchen table, coffee between them. The storm had arrived, wind howling outside, but the house was warm and solid. "You don't have to work this hard," Cole said finally. "You're earning your keep just fine with the cooking." "I'm not afraid of work," Sarah replied. "I can see that." Cole studied her across the table. "The way you tried to build with those broken boards that took courage." Sarah's hands wrapped around her coffee cup. "Courage or desperation?" "Both. Maybe, but you didn't quit." "That matters. You didn't have to help me," Sarah said. "Most men wouldn't have." Cole looked uncomfortable with the praise. "Emma used to say I had a good heart under all the leather. I'd been forgetting that. You reminded me." They sat in companionable silence. Outside, wind battered the house, but inside was warm and solid. Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in months' safety. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. Cole nodded. "Your ranch, you said it's struggling, but everything looks well maintained. The cattle are healthy. The hands are good workers. What's struggling about it?" Cole was quiet for so long Sarah thought she'd overstepped. Then he spoke, voice low. "After Emma died, I stopped caring about anything except keeping things going. Dutch manages the hands. The cattle take care of themselves, mostly. I just go through motions." He looked at her directly. "The ranch isn't failing financially. It's failing because there's no heart in it anymore. It's just existing, not living." Sarah understood. She'd felt that way since arriving west, existing, surviving, not truly living, just trying to get through each day. "You helped me because you saw yourself in those broken boards," she said softly. "Didn't you?" Cole's expression shifted. Surprise and recognition both. "You're smarter than I gave you credit for. You're kinder than you give yourself credit for," Sarah countered. "A man who keeps good lumber ready and rides out at dawn to help a stranger. That's not a man without purpose. That's a man waiting for the right reason to remember who he is." Cole stared at his coffee cup. Sarah watched emotions cross his weathered face, grief, recognition, something like hope. "Maybe," he said finally. "Maybe you're right." The storm intensified outside, battering the house with wind and snow. But inside, two people who'd been building lives with broken boards sat together in lamplight, discovering that good lumber and honest conversation could create something stronger than either had managed. Alone, Sarah looked at Cole across the table and saw not just a rancher who'd helped her, but a good man trying to find his way back to living fully. And Cole looked at Sarah and saw not just someone he'd rescued, but a woman whose courage and perception were exactly what his empty ranch needed to feel like home again. Neither said it aloud, but both felt it, the foundation being laid, careful and solid, for something that might grow into more than just employer and employee. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, warmth held steady. Good lumber, good foundation, good company. It was enough. The trip to town came 2 weeks later. Supplies were low and Cole needed to visit the bank. Sarah rode beside him in the wagon, wrapped against December cold. Copper Creek was small, maybe 200 people. One main street, buildings weathered gray by wind and time. People noticed them immediately, a rancher and a young woman, arriving together. Cole felt the stares but ignored them. He helped Sarah down from the wagon, polite and proper. "Mercantile's there," he said, pointing. "Get what we need. I'll be at the bank." Sarah nodded and headed across the street. Cole watched to make sure she got there safely, then turned toward the bank. The whispers had already started. Inside the Mercantile, Sarah gathered supplies methodically: flour, sugar, coffee, beans. The owner, Mrs. Davenport, watched her with sharp eyes. "You're the girl staying at the Brennan Ranch," Mrs. Davenport said. Not a question. "Yes, ma'am. I work there." "Work?" Mrs. Davenport's tone made the word sound suspicious. "And where exactly do you sleep?" "The bunkhouse spare room." "Convenient." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice level. "It's honest employment, ma'am." "Cooking and household management," Mrs. Davenport sniffed. "I'm sure that's what he calls it." Sarah's hands tightened on the sack of flour. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but dignity demanded silence. She completed her purchases and left quickly, face burning. Outside, she heard women talking near the church steps. Their voices carried clearly in the cold air. Living at his ranch shameful. That poor dead wife barely cold in the ground. You know what she is. Why else would she be out here alone? Sarah froze. The words hit like physical blows. She stood there, groceries in her arms, unable to move. The women noticed her. Their conversation stopped abruptly, but the judgment in their faces remained clear. They turned away, skirts swishing with righteous indignation. Sarah forced herself to walk to the wagon. Her hands shook as she loaded the supplies. Cole was still in the bank. She climbed onto the wagon seat and waited, staring straight ahead. Cole emerged 10 minutes later, face troubled. He climbed up beside her without speaking and guided the wagon out of town. 2 miles passed before Sarah spoke. "I'm leaving." Cole's hands tightened on the reins. "What happened? The talk? The looks? They think..." Her voice broke. "They think I'm something I'm not. And it's hurting you." The banker said something. Didn't he? Cole was silent, which was answer enough. "I won't cost you your livelihood," Sarah said firmly. "I'll find somewhere else." Where Cole's voice was hard. Another town, more broken boards, another man who makes promises he won't keep. That's not your problem. "The hell it isn't." Cole pulled the wagon to a halt, turned to face her. "You think I care what Mrs. Davenport thinks, or those church ladies who've never known a day of real hardship?" "I care," Sarah said quietly. "I care that helping me is causing you trouble." "Then you don't understand what kind of trouble matters," Cole said. The banker made noise about respectability and loans, said people were talking, that it looked bad. He met her eyes. "You know what I told him?" Sarah shook her head. "I told him my employment decisions were my own business, that you'd earned your place through capability and character, that if folks wanted to gossip, that said more about them than about us." "Cole, I'm not finished." His voice gentled slightly. 3 weeks ago, I watched you try to build shelter with broken boards. You didn't quit, didn't cry. Didn't give up. You just kept trying with what you had. That's more courage than most people show in a lifetime. Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears. You think I'm going to let small-minded people drive away the first person who's made this ranch feel like home since Emma died? Cole shook his head. Not happening. You stay or you go based on what you want, not on what they say. The wagon sat motionless on the frozen road. Wind whistled through bare trees. Sarah struggled with pride and practicality, gratitude and fear. What if the bank calls your loan? She whispered. Then we'll figure something out. Together. That word hung between them, together. Not employer and employee. Something more. Something building toward partnership. The storm that night was vicious, wind screaming around the buildings like something alive. Sarah lay in her bunkhouse room, listening to the fury outside. Through the window, she could see her old shelter site, the structure she'd built with Cole's lumber. It stood firm against the wind, good boards, good foundation. But would her presence at the ranch withstand social storms as well? Or would she become the broken board that brought everything down? She packed her belongings slowly, carefully. She'd leave at dawn, before anyone woke. It was the right thing to do. The only thing to do. The bunkhouse door opened. Dutch stood there, holding a lantern. Figured you might be packing, he said. Sarah didn't deny it. I can't let him lose the ranch because of me. Dutch stepped inside, set the lantern on the table. Boss is out there in the main house right now, wrestling his conscience. Question is, are you going to let him win that fight alone? This isn't his fight. It's mine. You're wrong about that. Dutch sat down heavily. 3 years I watched that man go through motions. Ranch ran fine, but he was dead inside. Then you showed up, trying to build something from nothing, and something woke up in him. The old cowhand looked at her directly. You reminded him what it means to care about something. To build instead of just maintain. Dutch. He's going to make his stand tomorrow. In town, going to tell the banker and everyone else exactly where he stands. Now, you can run away and let him make that stand alone, or you can stay and face it together. Dutch stood. Your choice. But seems to me, a woman brave enough to build shelter with broken boards is brave enough to stand beside a good man when he needs her. The old cowhand left, taking his lantern. Sarah sat in darkness, listening to the storm rage. She thought about courage, about broken boards and good lumber, about a man who'd ridden out at dawn with tools and kindness when he could have simply looked away. She unpacked her belongings. Cole sat in Emma's chair, the one by the fireplace she'd loved best. 3 years since she'd sat there. 3 years of that chair gathering dust while he avoided this corner of the room. Tonight, he sat in it deliberately, testing, maybe trying to hear her voice. Emma, he said aloud, I don't know what I'm doing. The fire crackled. Wind howled outside. No answer came, but he kept talking anyway. There's a woman here, Sarah. I helped her because she reminded me of you, a little. That determination you had, that refusal to quit even when everything looked impossible. He stared at the flames. Now the town's talking. The banker's making threats. And I can't figure out if I'm being noble or just stubborn. He imagined her response. Could almost hear it. Since when do you care more about what the town thinks than what's right? Since it might cost us everything, he said. Since my stubborn pride might lose the ranch. But that wasn't true. Not really. The ranch was secure financially. The threat was social, reputational. The banker wanted him to conform, to send Sarah away, to prove he cared about respectability more than his own judgment. You'd hate that, Cole said to the empty room. You always said comfort was for old men waiting to die. He thought about Sarah's face in the wagon, determined to leave rather than cause him trouble. Thought about her trying to build shelter with broken boards, her bloody hands, her exhausted courage. She was doing what he'd been doing for 3 years, trying to survive with inadequate materials, holding together through sheer will. The difference was, he could help her. He had good lumber and a warm place and work that needed doing. The question wasn't whether helping her was right. The question was whether he had the courage to keep helping when it got difficult. "I think I'm falling for her," Cole admitted quietly. "Not like us, not yet. But something's building there. Emma. Something that feels like it could be good. Given time." His throat tightened. "Is it okay to care about someone else?" The fire popped. The clock ticked. Emma's absence filled the room like a presence of its own. But underneath the absence, Cole felt something else permission. Maybe, or just the simple recognition that life continued, that hearts could hold multiple truths, that loving someone new didn't erase what came before. "I'm going to fight for her," Cole said. "Going to town tomorrow, making my stand public. If the banker doesn't like it, he can find another rancher to bully." He stood, touching Emma's chair gently. "Thank you for teaching me what real courage looks like. I'm finally remembering." Dawn came cold and clear, the storm blown through. Cole walked to the bunkhouse, knocked gently. Sarah opened the door. Her belongings were unpacked. He noted with relief. She'd stayed. "I'm riding to town," Cole said. "Going to make some things clear to folks. Thought you should know." Sarah's eyes widened. "Cole, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He met her gaze steadily. "You showed me what real courage looks like, building something from nothing, refusing to quit. I need that on this ranch. We need that. We, the ranch, the hands, me." He said it plainly, honestly. "You make this place feel like home again. First time in 3 years I've cared about more than just getting through days. I'm not losing that because some people forgot what frontier life is really about, helping each other survive." Sarah's throat worked. "The town can be cruel. Then they'll learn I can be stubborn." Cole almost smiled. "You earned this job by working harder with broken boards than most do with good lumber. That's the only qualification that matters to me. Anyone who questions it can take it up with their own conscience." He extended his hand, and after a moment, Sarah shook it. Not employer and employee, partners. Dutch appeared from the barn, leading Cole's saddled horse. The old cowhand nodded approval. "About time." Garcia and Billy came out, stood beside Dutch. Silent support, quiet solidarity. They'd watched Sarah work for 3 weeks, seen her competence and character. They knew quality when they saw it. Cole swung into the saddle. "Keep things running. I'll be back by supper." He rode toward town as the sun climbed, his shadow stretching long across frozen ground. Behind him, Sarah stood with the hands, watching him go. She touched the bunkhouse wall. Solid and strong. Good lumber, good foundation, the kind that held when storms came. "He's a good man," Dutch said quietly. "I know," Sarah replied. "Don't let him fight alone." Sarah looked at the old cowhand, understanding passing between them. "I won't." The ranch settled into waiting. Work continued, cattle to feed, fences to check. Ordinary tasks that grounded extraordinary moments. But everyone felt the shift, the sense that something important was happening in town, that their boss was finally fighting for something again, that he'd remembered how to care about more than just survival, and that sometimes the most courageous thing a person could do was stand firm when everyone else said to bend. Cole tied his horse outside the bank, took a breath, and walked inside. The banker, Herbert Morrison, looked up from his desk. "Brennan, I was expecting you." "Then you know why I'm here." Morrison leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Do you know how many people have commented on your situation, the church auxiliary, the town council, even the I don't care," Cole interrupted calmly. "About the comments or the gossip or what Mrs. Davenport thinks is proper?" Morrison's eyebrows rose. Your loan comes up for review in 3 months. Respectability matters in business. Brennan. Perception affects trust. Then I guess we'll find out what matters more, respectability or integrity. Cole met the banker's eyes steadily. Sarah Hartwell works for my ranch. She's capable, honest, and hardworking. She transformed a chaotic kitchen into an organized operation in 2 weeks. She keeps proper books, manages supplies, and can outwork most men I've hired. That's not the point. That's exactly the point. Cole's voice remained level but firm. Anyone who has questions about propriety can examine their own conscience. Mine's clear. I offered honest work to someone who needed it. That's what this territory was built on, people helping people survive. Morrison's face reddened. The town expects certain standards. The town needs to remember what real standards are. Cole leaned forward. Judging a woman for accepting honorable employment, that's not standards. That's cruelty dressed up as respectability. I could make things difficult for you. You could try. Cole straightened. But you'd be betting against a ranch that's run properly, pays its debts, and employs good people. That seems like poor business sense to me. He turned and walked out before Morrison could respond. The street was busy with midday traffic. Cole saw faces turn, conversations pause. He kept walking, heading for the church. Reverend Patterson was in his office, reviewing Sunday's sermon. He looked up when Cole knocked. "Mr. Brennan, please, come in." Cole sat, choosing words carefully. "Reverend, I need to talk about judgment and mercy." Patterson set down his pen. "I've heard the talk." "Then you know it's wrong. Sarah Hartwell hasn't done anything improper. She accepted honest work because the alternative was freezing to death." Cole's voice was quiet but intense. Where was Christian charity when she was building shelter with broken boards? Where were the church ladies? Then, the Reverend was silent for a long moment. "You're right," he said finally. "We failed her. It's easier to judge than to help." "I'm not asking for approval," Cole said. "Just fairness. Just recognition that helping someone survive isn't scandalous, it's decent." Patterson nodded slowly. "I'll address it Sunday gently, but clearly. That's all I ask." Cole left the church, aware of eyes following him. He stopped at the mercantile. Mr. Davenport, not his wife, was behind the counter. "Brennan," he said carefully. "Jim." Cole set his hands on the counter. "Your father hired a woman in need once. Didn't he, woman who'd lost everything in a fire? She worked in your store for 20 years. Became the best bookkeeper you ever had." Davenport's expression shifted. "Mary Henderson." "Yes." "People talked then too, didn't they?" "They did." Davenport looked uncomfortable. "My father ignored them. Said judging her for accepting help said more about them than about her." He paused. "I'd forgotten that. Maybe worth remembering," Cole said quietly. He walked out and stood in the street, letting his presence be seen. Not aggressive, not defensive, just present, visible, making his stand. Some people avoided his eyes. Others nodded slightly, thoughtful expressions on their faces. A few the mercantile owner, old Doc Williams. The blacksmith tipped their hats in silent acknowledgement. The tide was shifting. Not everyone, but enough. Cole rode home as afternoon light turned gold. The ranch appeared gradually, smoke rising from the bunkhouse chimney, lamplight beginning to glow in windows. Sarah stood by the corral, watching for him. When she saw him approach, relief crossed her face. He dismounted, and they stood facing each other in the cold twilight. "How did it go?" she asked. "Said what needed saying." Cole smiled slightly. "The banker doesn't like it. The Reverend understands. Some folks are starting to remember what matters. And if they don't, then they'll learn I can be more stubborn than they can be judgmental." He looked at the ranch, the buildings solid against the darkening sky. This place looks right again. Lived in, cared for. That's because of you. Sarah's eyes glistened. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Cole's voice was gentle. Just stay. Keep making this ranch feel like home. That's enough. They stood together as darkness fell. Two people who'd been building lives with broken boards, now standing on solid foundation. The ranch around them hummed with quiet life, cattle settling for the night, horses in the barn, cow hands finishing evening chores, home sounds, family sounds, good lumber, good foundation, good people standing together against storms. It was enough. It was everything. Spring arrived slowly, winter loosening its grip one day at a time. By April, the prairie wore green like a promise, wildflowers dotting the grass in scattered color. Sarah stood in the ranch garden, planting beds for vegetables. Her hands, once raw and bleeding, were calloused now but strong. She wore a new dress, practical cotton, nothing fancy purchased with her first month's wages. The ranch had changed, or maybe she'd just learned to see what was already there. The kitchen ran smoothly, supplies organized and tracked. The main house felt warmer, lived in. The hands smiled more, worked with renewed purpose. Cole had changed too. The hollow look in his eyes had eased, replaced by something that resembled peace. He still missed Emma. Sarah saw it sometimes in quiet moments, but the grief no longer paralyzed him. The loan had been approved. Morrison's objections had faded when the Reverend's sermon gently reminded the congregation about charity and judgment. Not everyone welcomed Sarah, but enough did. The blacksmith's wife brought preserves. Doc Williams tipped his hat when they met in town. Small gestures, but they mattered. One evening, Cole found Sarah at her old shelter site. The structure still stood, weathered but solid. Grass grew around it, wildflowers blooming in scattered patches. Thinking about that day, Cole asked, joining her. Every day, Sarah admitted. I tried so hard to make those broken boards work, hammered until my hands bled, adjusted every angle I could think of. It still wasn't enough. You did what you could with what you had. That takes courage. Sarah turned to face him. You showed me the difference good lumber makes, not just in building, but in everything. You gave me solid foundation when I only had broken pieces. You gave me something too, Cole said quietly. Reminded me that life keeps going, that there's purpose beyond just surviving. He looked at the shelter, then at her. 3 years I was building my life with broken boards, going through motions, pretending it was enough. You showed me it wasn't. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The ranch behind them glowed with lamplight, smoke rising from chimneys, the peaceful sounds of evening settling in. I was thinking, Cole said carefully, about expanding the garden next year, maybe adding a greenhouse. If you'd be interested in staying that long. Sarah's heart lifted. I'd like that. And maybe, Cole hesitated, unusual for him. Maybe we could talk about making the arrangement more permanent. Not just employment, partnership, equal stake in the ranch, decisions made together. Sarah looked at him, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Not marriage, not yet. Perhaps not ever in the traditional sense, but something deeper, true partnership, built on mutual respect and shared labor. Some things you build with lumber, she said softly. Some things you build with trust. Both need good foundation. Cole finished. They walked back to the ranch together, side by side. Dutch stood by the barn, saw them coming, and smiled. Garcia waved from the bunkhouse. Billy called out about supper being almost ready, family sounds, home sounds. Sarah touched Cole's arm gently. Thank you. For the lumber, for the work, for believing I could be more than just someone who needed rescue. Thank you, Cole replied, for showing me what real courage looks like, for reminding me that good lumber is wasted if you're too afraid to build something with it. They reached the main house as full dark settled. Through the windows, lamplight glowed warm and steady. The kitchen table was set for supper plates for all the hands, everyone eating together like family should. Sarah paused at the door, looking back at the prairie. Somewhere out there was the place she'd tried to build hope with broken boards, the place where she'd been certain she'd die, where courage alone hadn't been enough, but good lumber had been enough, good foundation, good people willing to help. She stepped inside, Cole following. The house welcomed them with warmth and the smell of fresh bread. The hands gathered, talking and laughing. Dutch poured coffee. Garcia dealt cards for after-supper games. Billy showed off a book he'd finished reading. This was what home looked like. Not perfect, not fancy, just solid and warm and built on good foundation. Cole caught Sarah's eye across the table, smiled slightly. She smiled back, understanding passing between them. They'd both been building lives with broken boards since Emma died. Her since promises failed. Now they were building with good lumber. Together. The ranch around them hummed with quiet contentment. Cattle grazed on spring grass. Fences stood strong. The land prospered under care and attention. Some things you built with lumber, some things you built with trust. Both required good foundation, careful work, and the courage to keep building even when storms came. They had all three. They had enough. And somewhere on the prairie, a shelter built from broken boards and good lumber stood as testament proof that what seemed impossible could become real when the right person appeared with the right tools at the right time. Sarah looked around the table at the family she'd found, at the home she'd helped build, at the future stretching before her like open prairie. She'd arrived with nothing but broken boards and determination. She'd been given lumber, purpose, belonging, and together they'd built something that would last.